Okay, today we are covering Chapter 5, Account Management. For this chapter, you'll need your Windows Server as well as a Windows 7 client computer. It should be a dedicated client machine for this class. Don't try to dual purpose this because after today, it will be part of a domain. You'll be joining the domain. You cannot run it standalone anymore. Especially if you've used a Windows 7 computer in anything like Gordy's classes or anything, because all kinds of settings are changed, and that's the whole point of those activities. So it should be a clean install or something that you know is at least something good to go with. There's a setting we need to change later on with an IP addressing. It's not in the book, so please pay attention. I'll try to put that information out in Angel as well, specifically what step and where that goes. I'm going to go through briefly the text for the chapters, but I'll be primarily concentrating on the activities and walking us through step by step so that you can review the activities over and over, and if you get stuck, you can rewatch the videos to be able to, sort of see what the steps were. There's a couple of activities that do not currently work. I have an email into the author. He says he's going to look into it and get back to me. I've not heard from him yet, and so I'll see what we can work with that. So anyway, starting off with the beginning for the chapter is user management. We've already done a lot of stuff with users. They're just going to get a little bit deeper and show you more tabs and more screens, and then be able to work with them more extensively. Working with user accounts on page 152 is one of the most important Active Directory activities tasks. Users are the main link between the real people and the network resources, so user accounts management requires not only technical expertise, but also people skills. It's also one of the things in this entire book that you will do on a regular basis. Next week we talk about printers. You don't set up printers every week. You don't set up new servers every week. You don't create an Active Directory tree every week. You don't even do that. You install Active Directory once. You install a server maybe once or twice a year if you're in a busy place. Otherwise, this might be every 2 or 3 years before you do that. Printers you put in, they're good for a couple of years at least. So those are not regular activities. User account management, and then, as we have also seen, file management are the two things that you do very regularly. And in fact, you will do user management multiple times a week, anywhere from resetting passwords to creating new accounts to disabling accounts because somebody's on leave or vacation, or putting them part of a new group. They get a new title, anything like that. So this is pretty important. Like I said, we already created some accounts, so that shouldn't be real new to you. Just sort of pay attention to what the activities are trying to point out to you. A couple more pieces of information on page 154. A couple considerations when working with Active Directory users. Other Active Directory objects must be unique only in their container. So that means within sales, I can have a printer called HP printer, and I could have another HP printer in the marketing organizational unit. Those can, in fact, be non-unique across the entire organization. They just have to be unique in that specific organizational unit. Users, on the other hand, have to be unique across the entire organization. So choose wisely and come up with a scheme and come up with a standard. Say, like Paul Benfield or P Benfield or Benfield P or Paul B or P Benfield 123 or whatever your ID is or something like that. Something that you can relatively be assured that you're going to have a unique combination, and still people are going to be able to figure out who you are and what you are by sort of looking at the naming and the scheme. You can have up to 20 characters, but you just can't use some of the special characters like quotes, semicolons, brackets, asterisks, plus signs, and so forth. By default, the complex password is required, and passwords are in fact case sensitive. Complexity means a certain length. It also means at least 3 different types of characters, whether it be numbers, uppercase, lowercase, and special characters, and you can mix and match those. You don't have to have all those combinations. You just have to have certain combinations. We actually go through an activity today of showing that. By default, only a login name and password are required to create a valid user, but descriptive information such as last name, first name should also be included to facilitate Active Directory searches. So when you're looking for things, you can find them more easily, especially if you're using obscure login names. We already looked at full name, login name, passwords, and all the check boxes as far as disable account, password never expires, or whatever. So the first activity is, in fact, activity 5-1 on page 156. And that is going to be creating a user account. So the objective is to create a user account with different account options on it. And the description is you want to experiment with some user account options that can be set during the user creation. So we're going to log on to our server. I'm going to click Control-Alt-Insert so I can log in. And I want to log in as the administrator. My password should be a capital PASSWORD01. And once we get in, we want to go into Active Directory users and computers. Okay, now that I'm in, Start, Administrative Tools, Active Directory Users and Computers. It does tell me that my password is going to expire in 13 days, so we might want to consider that. That's an optional thing. It's going to come up here, and it still brings up Server Manager by default. So I can close Server Manager. I don't need that. I do want to use this. As long as I'm here, this is not in the activities. This isn't required for you to do, but you do get the little warning saying that your password is going to expire in 14 days, which is 2 weeks from now. Let's go ahead and just take care of that now if you want to. Administrator is located under Users. So if I click under the Users container, I can go up to Administrator up on top. I'll double click. I'm sorry, no, I don't want to do that. I want to right click on Administrator. No, I do want to go to Properties. Sorry, back and forth. I'm thinking of two different things at the same time. I want to go under Account. And under Account, we have Account Options, which is Password Never Expires. So I'm just going to apply this for right now so I don't have to worry about resetting it in 2 weeks. So the password never expires under the Account tab, under the Account Options. Okay, I'm going to click OK, and now I'll continue on with this step or this activity. This activity wants us to go to the test OU, and that's one we created a couple weeks ago, and we have a couple test users and test group in there. And I want to create a new user. A couple ways of doing that. I can click on test OU and the little person up on top, or I can right click and do new user. I actually see myself going back and forth a lot of times of which way I do it, sort of what's convenient at the moment. Under the login name, this activity just wants us to type in test user 3 for the login name. And I can't click next because I don't have a full name up in here. Well, the full name gets filled in automatically as I do the first name, which would be test. And as soon as I do that, I could click next if I wanted to. But under user last name, I'm going to be putting user 3. So test user 3. And click next. The password looks pretty complex to me. P at $WORD. This is step 3 in the text activity. P at $WORD. And let's see. User cannot change the password. So if I click on the user cannot change the password, it's going to say something. There we go. You cannot check both the user name must be changed at next login and the user cannot change the password. Because they're kind of contradictory. You can't say you have to change it next time and by the way you can't change it. So let's go switch those. Let's uncheck the user must change the password and check just the user cannot change it. And now I'm going to click next and I'll click finish. Windows cannot set the password for test user 3 because the password does not meet the password policy requirements of minimum length and complexity. So I don't always agree with when warning messages come up. After you click finish, after a couple screens, I think is a little bit late to tell you that. I think that maybe the next button here would have been a more appropriate time. But that's just my opinion. No one asked me. We're going to keep it the same, so it's going to be P at $$WORD, but we're just going to add a number 1 at the end. That's going to do 2 things. So it's going to make it longer, and it's going to add the third type of character, which is a number to this complexity, and that should meet our complexity standards then. So P at $WORD1, and I keep everything else the same. And I click Finish, and I don't get that error message. We're going to log off, and we're going to log on as test user 1 at this point. Test 1. No, don't log in as test user 3. You want log in as test user 3. It's one of those days. There's so many test users. It's trying to keep them straight. Later on, we're going to work with groups. I got really confused this morning as we're just jumping around and do this, do that. Groups are confusing all in of themselves. So I'm logging off administrator, and I'm going to log in as test user 3. So if you get that same error of saying that you're not allowed to log onto the computer because of the policy or whatever it is, it's probably because the group policy is not enabling that. In Chapter 3, we had changed that. That's on page 103. Steps 17 through 20 will tell you how to change the default, the group policy to enable pretty much anybody to allow log on locally to the server. And that's what's not enabled right now. Continue on. We're going to log in as test user 3. So Control-Alt-Insert. And I need to switch the user to another user. And it is test user 3. And the password is P at $WORD1. And I log in. Users can change their own passwords. Normally, they're allowed to do that. In this case, we said we could not do that. But for a user to change their password, they can use the Control-Alt-Delete sequence to bring up the change password screen. When this person finally logs in, we're going to do that for this user and see what happens. So when I come back on here, if I do a Control-Alt-Insert on the virtual machine and Control-Delete on a normal computer, it will bring up this task list. One of them is to change a password. I'm going to click on Change a Password. Again, no one asked me when a good warning message would come up, but if I'm not allowed to change a password, I'm thinking that clicking here now would be the time to tell me, as opposed to typing in P at $WORD1 and then going to P at $WORD2, P at $WORD2, and then clicking next, and then being told that I can't do it. Just my opinion. But clicking OK, and I have to cancel out of this. I can't really go past this at all. And it just says access denied. It doesn't even really say that you can't change your password. It just says access denied. And for a typical user, that could be confusing. Like, what do you mean access? Did I do something wrong? So let me try it again. And they're going to try it again, and then finally call you. What does that mean? And then we tell them that we're not going to let you change your password. Seems a little silly, but that's okay. Oh, yeah. Yeah. But it doesn't say you can't do it. It just says access denied. Okay, now what we're going to do is just log back off and log back in as administrator and go back to our users and computers. So we just prove that if we set the person can change their password, they in fact can change their password. So let's log off. logging off. Okay, when I come back, Control-Alt-Insert. I'm going to switch users, and I'll log back in as another user. I'm going to log in as administrator. Capital P-A-S-S-W-O-R-D 01. And the next thing we're going to do is create another user called TestUser4. Click and start. And I should wait. There we go, administrative tools. For this password, any password is fine. I'm going to use password 01 with a capital P. That meets the complexity requirements. And I'm going to close the Server Manager. I don't need Server Manager. And I'm come back to Active Directory users and computers. I'm going back under the Test OU, the Test Organizational Unit, where I have test users 1 through 3. And I'm going to create another user, the same one, called TestUser4. First name Test User 4. And it's going to be TestUser4 for my login. Password, just to meet the complexity, capital P-A-S-S-W-O-R-D 01. It has uppercase, lowercase, and numbers, and plenty long. It's a whole lot easier than typing the @ and $signs. And this one, we're going to be choosing the last option, which is the account is disabled. The account is disabled, and then I'm going to click Next, and then Finish. If you notice, for the TestUser4 now, it has a little down arrow next to it. It's a little hard to see, but it's there, which means that it's not available or it's disabled. We have a couple of other users. If we click on the Users Organizational Unit, we saw that our guest user, by default, is also disabled. So the guest account is not enabled on these machines by default. Going back to Test OU, I can see that that is disabled, and it puts it at the bottom of the list. This user can change his password. This user will be prompted to change their password the next time they log in. Unfortunately, they can't log in. So let's go ahead and try that. This is not one of the activities. This is bonus material. So lucky you. If I go to log off, and I wait for the login screen to come back. So I'm going to log in as Control-Alt-Insert. I want to switch user, and other user is TestUser4 with a password of capital P-A-S-S-W-O-R-D 01. And then I enter, and it says, your account has been disabled. Please see your system administrator. Very clear, very precise message. I love it. This is one of the better messages that they have, and it's very descriptive and tells you what's wrong and what to do. So I do like this message. Okay, I just tried to log in as the TestUser4. Account was disabled. It told me to contact my system administrator. I logged out and logged back in as the administrator. I really don't need this to be up here anymore, so I can close that. The next section is dealing with user templates. This isn't a true template. It's using the user account as a template. In a true template, like a Word template or any kind of templates you're probably familiar with, it's a special type of document or a special form that in fact copies everything over to it. This gives you a starting point to start with. It's not an object itself. It's not a document itself. It's not a fax cover letter itself. It just helps you create that initial one. We're doing the same thing with a user account to look and act like a template. When we get to this lab, though, you can see some of the limitations with it and where it applies and where it doesn't apply when we're talking about acting like a template. So we're going to do the activity now, 5-2, and usernames and that kind of stuff, first name, last name, full name, don't make any difference. Neither is the login name itself. The only thing that's case sensitive is, in fact, the password. Okay, user templates in activity 5-2. We're going to go to the marketing organizational unit and actually the sales organizational unit underneath marketing. So I go to administrative tools and I go to users and computers. And I'm going to be creating a sales group. So not under test OU anymore, but under marketing and under sales. And I'll be creating a group named Sales G. So I'm going to right-click New Group and call it Sales-G. And we'll keep it as a global and security. We'll get into some of that stuff a little bit later on. And then I click OK. Now I'm going to be creating a user. Now this is our special user, so it's going to be looking a little bit differently. It still acts exactly the same way, but we're going to be calling it _sales. And then the last name will be template. The underscore actually puts it alphabetically first in the list. It also makes it very clear that this is not a true user, that this is sort of just indicating that it's a something special about it. But it is, in fact, a full regular user. You could, if we didn't, in fact, disable the account, you could log in as this person and they would have access to different things or whatever. So it's _sales template for the login name as well. And then I click next. The password for this, we're going to call it password1 with a capital P. And we're going to turn it, account is disabled. Make sure the account is disabled. So if somebody doesn't log in as a template, we don't want them to log in as a template. And I click next and then finish. Now we're going to do a couple things with this user account. If I double click on it, I have the general information here. Under the general information, I'm going to type in under the description, this is a sales template user account. For the office, I'm going to be putting in building 1. The phone number is 555-5555. And then the web page is www.coolgadgets.com. I'm going to click the address tab up on top. And I'm going to type in an address of 555 First Street. And that's located in Metropolis, Arizona, with a zip code of 12121. And of course, that's obviously located in the United States. If I go under Organization, which is the last tab on the first line up on top, I have a job title, and my job title is Salesperson. My department is Sales, and my company is Cool Gadgets. And the final thing I really want to work with this as a user account is I want to become a member of the sales group. So I click member of, and I want to find the sales group. Now I usually just start typing the object's name and click check names, it only has one thing that matches sales, and it comes up with sales G for the sales group. And that is correct, so I click OK. And so now they're part of the sales group. And I click I'm done. All that the apply button does on each of these tabs, if I was going in here, is if I made a change to here, like cool gadgets, if I click apply, it saves it, but then lets me go on to another tab. It just allows you to save things as you go. If I clicked OK at this time, it takes me out of there. But sometimes you forget, it's like, oh, did I change this, not change this, or whatever. So sometimes it's just kind of nice to click apply so you know it's saved. So, it's saved up to that point, all your settings, no matter which tab it is. You do not have to apply per tab. This is kind of where the template is kind of used at this point, is by we're going up to here. Oh, this is the right page in here. We're on page 158, step 10. We right-click on it and we do a copy. That's kind of like using like a Word document. You type the Word document and you're going to copy it to another document. That's not truly a template. And this one even has a few other features that kind of limits it as well. When you copy from one object to another, it does ask you for a new username and password. So we're going to call this one sales person. Oh, not middle initial, last name. Person 1 is your last name. So that'll be Mr. Person 1. The login name is salesperson 1. And then we click next. So sales is the first name, person 1 is the last name, and then salesperson 1 is the login name. Click next. The password, we're going to use the password of a regular one, capital PASSWORD01. If you notice, it says that the account is disabled. And we want to uncheck that, because we want it to be enabled so the person can actually log in. I go ahead and click next. Leave that as a default, so that's fine. Uncheck account is disabled, correct. And then click finish. And so now I create a new person. There's my salesperson 1 created with that template. Yay! Now let's take a look at what happened inside though. If I double click on the person, double click like on the little person's body there. Nothing? Okay, right click properties. Right click properties. So on the left hand side right now is sales template, and the right hand side on my screen is salesperson 1 properties. And if you notice, there's a lot of blank stuff here. This stuff didn't get copied over. So if in fact I did have building 1 as my office location, and I truly wanted that to be a template, it doesn't copy over. And you're going to see where some things copy and some things don't copy. Clicking over on address tab on both of them, you're going to see that it copied the city, state, zip, and country, but didn't copy the street for whatever reason. Clicking on organization tab and comparing those, it copied the department and the company, but not the job title. So you can see it does some things and not the others. A really, really important one, which it does do, which is good, is if you look under member of and member of, it does add it to the sales G group though. So that's like a really important one. Those other things, a lot of people don't even use them, so it's not real critical. But if you're thinking a template is copying everything over, it's not. It's only doing a couple fields. And it's not even real consistent. I mean, like I said, like the address part, it's going to do some fields but not the others. Or even under general. It does, actually didn't do any under the general, come to think of it. So questions on that? Well, since it doesn't copy everything over, there might be, we're going to work with editing multiple users on the page 159 talks about. There's some things that you can do across multiple people at the same time. So in fact, if I wanted everybody to be in the same office, I could then go back later and change them, modify them, or put that in there for the first time. So moving right to activity 5-3 on page 159. we're going to work with editing multiple user accounts. To work with that, we actually want to create a couple more users, and we're going to do it the same way we just created salesperson 1, and that's by using the sales template. So this would be a very common task. We have a template set up with some basic information on it that we want to copy. I copy that to other people, and then we go back and fix those people up. So that's sort of the sequence of things that do it. So I'm going to copy it, and I'm going to call this next person sales, except his last name is going to be, or her last name is going to be person 2. Salesperson 2. I'm keeping the same password of password 01, I should say, with a capital P. And I'm going to leave these checked just the way that they are. Actually, no, I'm going to change this one. User must change the password. I'm going to uncheck that, but I'm going to keep it checked where it says account is disabled. I click next. The passwords don't match. Okay, that's my fault. That is nice they told me right away and not after the finish. So I do appreciate that. That's a good one. And I'm going to copy the sales template again. Copy to salesperson 3. And I'm going to uncheck the user must change the password, and I'm going to keep the account as disabled. I click finish. So now I have multiple salespeople there. Salespeople 1 through 3. Okay, so we just finished step 3. We're going to move into step 4. In Active Directory, users and computers, select salesperson 1, and then shift-click, select salesperson 3. Shift clicking is just like in Windows Explorer. It selects the whole range. In fact, I could click on the template, and I could shift-click the sales, and it selects everything in between. It can be a very long list, short list, whatever it is. Realize you can also use the Control key to select. So if I click on Sales G and I hold on the Control key, I can choose Salesperson 2 and then the Sales template, and then check it again to turn it off, turn this one off, turn that one on. It's a toggle switch that turns it on and off for selection. So all they want you to do is select Salesperson 1 through 3 to make sure that they're all selected, because those are the properties that we're going to be doing. Now, if you do the same type of object, and again, this isn't specifically in the book, so just sort of watch. If I bring up the properties, it's going to bring up a lot of different things. If they're different types of objects, like if I do a person and a group, and I do the properties, it's only the things that are in common, which is pretty much nothing. Change the description text for all selected objects. So there's a description field, and if I put that in there, they would change it for both those objects, but that's about it. So it only shows the things that are in common. Well, okay, going back to the actual step, I'm going to choose salespeople 1 through 3 by holding down the Shift key and clicking the first object, Shift, last object. Now I have all these things that I can change. If I don't change the description, if I don't check this checkbox, nothing gets changed in the description. Rumor has it one student has very descriptive descriptions about their users, and you don't want to change them, then just leave it. Because as soon as you click the checkbox here, anything that you type in here overwrites what's in the current users fields. But if you don't check it, it'll keep everybody the same. So realize it's going to apply to everybody. You can't say, well, you know what, for these 2 people I want this to happen, and those 4 people I want that to happen. Well, then you only select those 2 people, or you select those 4 people, because if something's in that field, it does get overwritten. Now, I'm just going to go through some very arbitrary decisions that they made, just to go through and fill in some of these blanks. Let's see, what is it? Under description, We're going to call it a Cool Gadgets salesperson. Type in anything. Type in salesperson. Type in person. Don't get real stuck on the actual wording because it really doesn't make any difference. I'm going to check down on the web page as well towards the bottom. I'm going to type in www.coolgadgets.com. I have other tabs across here as well. I'm going to click on the Account tab. And under Account, I have these different account options. And I really don't like this scrolling on any of these places that have it. It'd be just nice to have all the fields out there. But again, if I check it, then this field becomes active as either unchecked. So right now, I'd be forcing everybody, where it says user must change password, I'd be forcing everybody's account to be unchecked. If I don't check this, then nothing happens to it. So some people might be checked, some people might not be checked. Very perfect situation is right now, some of our accounts are enabled and the other ones are disabled. If I want to make them all the same, I check the checkbox next to account is disabled, and now I can either disable it or not disable it. And that's the one that we actually have to check, is by checking over here, saying I want to modify this field, and I want to make sure that everybody's account is not disabled. And you can click apply anywhere along here. You don't have to go through and do the whole thing. So if you check over here, right now salespeople 2 and 3 are disabled, the little down arrows there. If I click apply, they've now become enabled. You know, it's just enabled right away. Moving across though, if I click on address, I can type in, I want to change the street, because the city, state, and zip and country all remain the same. It was the street that didn't copy over. And we can call it 123 what, Main Street? I forgot what it's called. 555 what? First Street. First Street, thank you. First Street. I could copy and paste as well. Yeah, I could. Profile, we'll come back later and work with that one. But underneath organization, we're just going to call it a sales associate. Oh, because that's what's in common. If everybody all had in common, it also show up as well. So yes, okay. Job title, and I guess that's okay. So that's pretty much, and it doesn't matter what you apply, just put a couple things in a couple different fields. So again, don't get real stuck on, I didn't type this correctly. If I click on person 1 now, and I look under address, my address is all there. If I look under account, no, not account, I'm sorry, organization, I've been renamed. I used to be called a salesperson, now I'm called a sales associate. If I look under user 2, the first most obvious thing is I'm not disabled anymore. In addition, I have this filled out for my display name description. I'm sorry, not display name, description and web page. Under account, I am not disabled. Under organization, I'm a sales associate. And account 3 is the same thing. Okay, the next section is understanding account properties. And account properties are pretty much going through the tabs we just looked at. So I don't want to spend a ton of time on here, but if we double click on a person, we can see what information we have here. Office, email, telephone number, the addresses we already looked at, a lot of different account settings. User must change password, user can't change password. Account is disabled and so forth. Organization, a couple of the things they have is the terminal services profile. We don't even get into that, but this is where they would be. They talk about it in the book. Under security, here's another tab. We look at security a lot when we're working with file systems, but they have the exact same thing underneath the objects themselves. So this is a user group, so it's an access control list. Who can do what? So everyone can have some special permissions down there about this account, and also can change, their own passwords. Authenticated users can do different things as well. and you can see what they can all do or not do. Member of, we've already worked with. We've played that with quite a bit. And I think those are the main ones that they talk about. So nothing real different. We will be working with profiles. There's a profile tab up here, about the profile path, and that's going to get into when we talk about profiles and roaming profiles. The next section is dealing with contacts and distribution lists. And we've been working with groups so far. So if I click on the sales group is a global group space and a security type. Those are the main majority of the ones that we'll be working with. There is the ability to work with distribution lists as well, which we think of like email lists and so forth. We also have what's called a contact. It's not a user, but we can put people in the organizational structure of the Active Directory that aren't really here, and we just refer to them as a contact. In Activity 5-4, it's going to be going through that kind of process. So we're going to create a contact in a distribution list. Here's a description of the activity. You need to have a marketing business partner's contact information readily available. Because your users are well-versed in using Active Directory to find other directory information, you decide to put the contact and distribution list in Active Directory for outside business contacts. By the way, this is not common, but we're going through it. It's cool that you can do it, put it that way. In the marketing organizational unit, right now we have an advertising and a sales organizational unit. So marketing, we have advertising and sales. We're going to create a new organizational unit under marketing. A new organizational unit under marketing. This is Activity 5-4, page 166, Step 2, actually Step 3. So we go to marketing and we go to new organizational unit. And the new organizational unit is called external. So just go ahead and type external and hit enter. You now have 3 organizational units under marketing, advertising, sales, and external. Make sure you're in the external organizational unit. And now right-click on the empty space in the right pane and go to new. And we have a contact. We don't want to put a new user. We want to put a new contact. And there isn't a whole lot of information about them. But we can put what's it called? Partner 1 is the name. So partner is the first name, and 1 is the last name. And they're just throwing this together right now, so it's nothing real critical. When you create the user, you only get to really create their name. If you double-click on their name or go to Properties, right-click Properties, you do have a lot more information you can put in. It looks very much like a user, but it is just a contact. Just use a contact. It does have an address, locate, and a telephone, organization. It does also have its own security and members of. Once I create a partner 1, I want to create a group now. And we're going to create a distribution group under here. And to do that, I right-click, and then go to New, and I go to Group, a new group. And we're going to call it a marketing email group. So MKT email, marketing email. And we're going to leave the default group space as global, but we do want to change it from a security type group to a distribution group. A security group is used primarily. That's 99.9% of the groups we create are security groups. We use them for administering security. We want the sales group to do this. We want the marketing group to do that. We want the administrators group to be able to do this. We want the domain users group to be able to do that, and so forth, so on and so forth. A distribution group does not have those capabilities. You cannot add a distribution group to an access control list. So you can't say this marketing email list can delete files or whatever. Just making that really, really clear. So clicking OK. So now I have a group and a user. Just They look the same as a security group as a normal user, but just pay attention to what they are listed here. We add people to the group the same way. So if I go to Partner 1, I double click on Partner 1, and I want to make Partner 1 a member of, I click Add, and I'll just type MKT and check names, and marketing email comes up for me. I click OK. And I click OK. So now that user is part of that group. So anything I want to do with that group, if it's a distribution group, so if I want to email, I could email to everybody in that group. If I want to print out address labels, I could print out address labels for everybody in that group. We don't cover that anymore in the book, so that's about as much as you get with distribution groups and contacts. It's just out there. The next big thing is working with profiles. There's a section here that doesn't work, so I'll be patient. I'm still waiting to hear back from the author. And we'll probably cover those things later on when I do find a solution to that. But working with user profiles, page 167 a user profile is a collection of the user's personal files and settings that define his or her working environment. By default, the user's profile is created when the user logs into the computer for the first time. The profile is stored in a folder that usually has the user's login name, and then it sort of talks about more specifics about that underneath there. So it's everything about it: your background, what things are on your start menu, all your programs, not all your programs, I'm sorry, but all your documents. So if you look under computer and then under documents, it will actually store all those in your profile. So when a different person logs in, they're going to get a different environment and a different configuration. And we're very common and used to that. And but we're going to sort of expand on that. We want that profile to go with us when we talk about roaming profiles. And that's what they're talking about on page 168 is if I have my configuration on this computer and I will log on to this computer, I want it to carry over. I want it to have the same background. I want my documents to go with me. I want all my desktop icons to be there and so forth. And that's considered a roaming profile. And we get to configure that and actually use that. And then the last type of profile is a mandatory profile. That's one of those that's set and it's configured and you just have this and you can't do anything with it. And this is how it works. People can change things. I can change my background. I can change things in my start menu. I can add, delete things or whatever. As soon as I log off and log back in, I get my original mandatory profile back. So all that other stuff is gone. So that might be one way of dealing with some computer issues or whatever. I think group policies does a lot better job for that though. Okay. Before we can have profiles, though, we need to have a computer to show how profiles work. And in order for a computer to be engaged or working with the profiles, especially roaming profiles, that's actually part of the domain. And that's going to be our next activity, is adding a computer to our domain. And this is where our, just one second. And this is where our Windows 7 computer is going to come in. We're going to be joining it to the domain. Right now, it's completely separate. They can do whatever they want. We're going to be joining the Windows 7 computer to the domain, and now the domain is going to be taking all control of this. So let's go and just close that. We don't need this right now. We're going to be doing a lot of this stuff right from the Windows 7 machine. So if you have your Windows 7 machine available, okay. Okay, coming back here. Working on this computer. I do need to make one change to an IP setting. It's not in the book, but it's going to ask us to join a domain. It's going to type in the name, like w2k8ad10.com. It's not going to resolve that because it doesn't know where that location is. So I need to change my DNS settings to point to something that does. And to do that, there's a couple different ways of doing this. I'm just going to take you through one way. I'm going to click on the Start button, and then go to Control Panel. And I'm going to click on Network and Internet. And I'm going to go up to Network and Sharing Center. I could have also right-clicked in the corner and gone right to there by Open Network and Sharing as well, but I'm in the same place. I want to change the adapter settings. Change the adapter settings in the upper left-hand corner. And you should have a local area connection. If I right-click on here, go to Properties, right-click Properties for the local area connection. This is where my TCP/IP version 4 settings are. And this is something you should be really, really familiar with how to get here eventually, because in IT, IP addresses are kind of stuck in nature of things you have to work with, so kind of get used to getting here. I want to click Properties here, though. And right now, you don't have to do this. I'm just going to show you what it is right now. I'm using DHCP to get my addresses. So if I do an ipconfig/all, I'm getting my address automatically, and it's giving me an address of 192.168.118.131, but my DNS server is 192.168.118.2. This is my virtual machine environment. That's actually my router, my virtual router, and a lot of times DNSs are pointed back to themselves, and then they get forwarded on. Like I said, though, when it tries to resolve the name w2k8ad10.com, this has no idea about it. So we want to change this to point to the server. If you remember doing the server installation process, not the server installation, but the Active Directory installation process, right towards the end, what did it have you install? DNS. It made you do DNS. And it did that so it could resolve some of these names. So we don't need to change the top part. We're going to let it get its IP address automatically still. We're just going to change the following DNS server information. And that will be our server. Make sure that you have your numlocks on. 192.168.118.210. And everybody's is the same because we're all in our own little virtual worlds. When you're done with that, go ahead and click OK and click Close. You do not have to do this. It's your server's IP address. If you do this properly with an IP config, it should show you that your DNS server is in fact 192.168.118.210, which is your server now and no longer the router. And again, you do not have to do the IP config. Okay, now I come back here. Now I can actually do the steps that are in the chapter here. You do need to have that, otherwise it won't resolve. You'll get to the step that says, join the domain. It says I can't find it because I don't know what number I can translate from this name. So to change this, I want to go to Start, and I want to right-click on Computer and go to Properties. This is the same place you change a computer name and change a workgroup name. On the right-hand side, towards the bottom, it says Change the settings for the computer name, domain, and workgroup settings. So I click Change Settings. Okay, yes, under computer name, it says that right now the workgroup is the workgroup. This is really misleading for a lot of people. They'll start typing things in here. That's only the computer description. That doesn't change anything. To rename this computer or change its domain, we want to do both. We want to click the Change button here. And the first thing we want to do is change the computer name. And the computer name might be a whole bunch of random letters and numbers, or you could have named it or whatever. But we want to call it Win710. So it's going to look like 710. That'll be the version of Windows that your kids will be running. We also want to change it from workgroup to domain. And so we're going to click on the little domain button. And this is where I want to type in the domain that we want to connect to. So it's w2k8ad10.com. After you do that, we click OK. if we set up our IP addresses and we're both part of the same network and they're both NATed, both our client is NATed and our server is NATed, we should come up with a computer name, username and password required to join the domain. People just can't join the domain on their own. They can't say, you know what, I want to join a domain today. You need somebody special to allow that to happen. And likewise, when you try to remove yourself off the domain, you need somebody with that privileges to do that. They'll physically have to go to the computer and do this. And it's done by the computer, not by the user. So this is all done before it's ever put on somebody's desk. So the machine comes in the back door, they set it up, they put it on the domain, and then they give it to you. And so administrator is our username, and our password is a capital PASSWORD01. And I click OK. And if all goes well, you should get a message saying, congratulations, you've joined the domain. Welcome to the domain. Welcome to the blah, blah, blah domain. Click OK. And wait some more. You must restart to apply these changes. Before restarting, save any open files and then close all the programs. So you click OK. And then you click Close on this button for the system properties. And then at that point, you'll be prompted to restart. And that's what we're going to do, is restart right now. It is now part of the domain, and it never shall leave without proper administrative access to allow you to leave, and only if it wants you to. Unless you have a VMware snapshot, and then you just go back to a place and time before you joined. By the way, at this point, it's really, really important that you keep your snapshots in sync. You better be taking snapshots about the same time. It doesn't have the exact same time, but you know, like pre-chapter 5, pre-chapter 6, or mid, whatever you're going to be doing, they should be done at the same time. What's going to mess things up is if you keep your workstation as saying, oh yeah, I'm part of this domain, and now you revert your server back to, I have no idea who you are. They can't log in. They will not be able to log in because the domain has no knowledge of you, and your machine can't log in because that's the only way it can log in is into a domain. Vice versa, the domain could say, hey, where's this computer? And you're logging in as, no, I'm a local computer. I don't know what you're talking about. You know, it's going to end up like this being a stale account sitting out there. When you try to join it, it's going to say, no, I already have something called that. We can't do it this way. So just make sure that they're both pre-domain or both post-domain. That's what the major thing. So just kind of be aware of that. Okay. I'm going to ahead and log in, Control-Alt-Insert. It's going to try to log into my local machine. So I want to switch user. I'm going to log in as admin. Now, I was having I'd had hit and miss, you know, on this. If I do W2K8AD10, which is the way you're supposed to log in, because then you're logging in as the domain. Administrator is about the only account that really gets confused, by the way, as far as whether you're local or on the server. And it defaults locally if you're trying to log as an administrator. All the other accounts default to log in the domain. So if I log in as salesperson without anything in front of it, it's going to assume it's logged into the domain. It should be password 01, W2K8AD10 slash, oh, either backwards slash, wrong slash, slash administrator, and now it's working. I mean, sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. The backslash. This is step 8 in activity 5-5 on page 171 is W2K8AD10 / administrator. If that doesn't work for some reason, see, it says the username and password is incorrect, and it's correct. So if that doesn't work, then do administrator @ Administrator. Did I miss it before? Oh, okay, maybe that's why that was wrong. Okay, I'll try back the other way. W2K8, but we had problems with it before, even spelled correctly. AD10, W2K8, AD10, administrator. Okay, this one's working. But we definitely had it spelled correctly, and it was not working for some accounts. But it says or administrator at. You can do that as well. Either way. Now I'm logged in local. Now I'm logged into this machine onto the server. So right now, when it's preparing this desktop, it's actually creating a local profile for the administrator account on this computer. Now that's fine, but any changes I make to here, like my start menu, my background, are only on this Windows 7 machine. If I go to another Windows 7 machine, it's not going to have those settings because it's going to have its own local profile. That's why we're going to talk about roaming profiles in the next activity. On the bottom of page 171 is creating a roaming profile. So the description for this is you want a user to have a roaming profile. The user has never logged into a domain before and received the default profile as the initial login. So if necessary, log in as administrator and Active Directory users and computers, top of page 172. So I need to switch over to my server. Here we go. Control-Alt-Insert. I'm on my server. I'm logging in. I've just been yakking too much, and so it locked my account. So I have to log in. And I'm going to start Administrative Tools, Active Directories, Users, and Computers. Okay, we're going to move on down to the marketing and sales people. Marketing, sales. We have a salesperson 1, 2, and 3. And we're going to end up giving salesperson 1 a roaming profile. Now, we didn't read through this section, but it talked about when you're creating a roaming profile, you actually need two things to happen. One is you need a place to put the profile, and then you need to tell the user to put their profile in that location. In my opinion, I would probably do this the opposite when the lab is doing it, but that's, again, my personal opinion. I have a lot of personal opinions. I would create the location first, and then I'd go to the user and point to that location. The lab is going to do it the opposite way. They're going to point to a location that doesn't exist, and then you create it, the location, to sort of match. It just seems a little scary to me. I'd just rather have the location and then point to it first. Personal preference. We're going to follow the steps in the lab, though, so we can keep consistent. So we're going to go to Salesperson 1. Everybody should be able to go to Salesperson 1, right-click, Properties, and there's that Profile tab up on top. So I click on Profile, and there's the Profile path. If there's nothing in there, it says there is no profile path. It's going to go to a local machine to the local default location. I want to put this out on a server, and very specifically, I want to put this on a server share, and we're going to call the share Profiles. So it's on server 10, and the share name is going to be Profiles. It doesn't exist yet, and we're going to be putting it in a Salesperson 1 folder. So the profile will actually be located under the Profiles share on the server 10 server. And that's really all that we need to do for the user part, is that we're putting the share out there, that we're putting the location of that out there. Now I need to create that share. So to do that, I'm going to go to Start, and then I'm going to go to Computer, and I'll go to my C drive. Now you can put this share anywhere that you want. It could be really deep, it could be really shallow, it could be on a data drive, it could be in your C drive, wherever you're going to put this. Normally we would not put on your C drive. That's the only drive that we have right now, but this is just what we're doing. So I'm going to create the new folder first of all. New folder. and I'm going to call it profiles. Now, what I pointed to was //server10 /profiles. That's not referring to this folder. It's actually referring to a share. So so this really doesn't do anything. It's the share that I'm really concerned about. So I need to right-click on here and go to Properties and create a share called Profiles. And the directory name and the share name can be different. So I could call this, tomato, and the share name would be profiles, and that would still work because it's the share name that really makes a difference. Up on top is the sharing tab. Why you'd call them something different, I'm not sure. Under the sharing tab, and we're going to do advanced sharing. We're all IT professionals. We do everything advanced. None of the simple sharing stuff for us. Now it actually does what we need to do very quickly and easily. The first thing is I want to share the folder. And right up on top it says, what do you want to call the share? And by default it is the share's profiles name because that's the name of the directory. We want to go under permissions as well. When we share something, by default, the only thing that can happen is everyone can read it. Well, that's not going to be enough because we're going to need people to write to it as well because they need to upload and share their roaming profiles out to that directory. But we don't want to use the everyone group. We actually want to be using, who are the domain users? Let me just double check. Yep, domain users. And so I'm going to click add down here. And I'll just start typing in domain and then check names. And I just prefer it this way. I like to choose from a list sometimes, like domain users. And then I click OK. So domain users and OK. So now I want to change the settings for the domain user. So I click on domain users. Just regular click so it's highlighted. And we want to allow full control for the domain users. Allow full control for the domain users. Then I click on everyone. And I want to remove everyone. So the only thing I should have on this list is domain users with full control, and that's it. And then I click OK. And I click OK. And I click Close. So now I have a profiles directory here. And if I double click on here right now, it's empty. Nothing's there because the salesperson 1 hasn't logged in yet, so it doesn't have a profile. So let's create a profile for that person automatically when they log in. Switch over to your Windows 7 machine. We're going to start. We're going to go to log off. We're going to log off our Windows 7 machine. And we'll log in, Control-Alt-Insert, as a different user. So click Switch User, Other, and it's going to be Salesperson1 with a password of PASSWORD01. And log in. The password must be changed before I log in for the first time. That is one of the switches that we had checked for that user, so I click OK. So I'm doing a PASSWORD02 with a capital P. And I go ahead and log in. Now, while this is logging, now it's changing passwords. It actually says password's been changed. I click OK. Let's just switch back to the server for a second. And if we see that profiles directory, we now have a profile for salesperson 1. So it takes the user's name and creates the profile, in there. I don't have permissions to see inside the folder, but I can see that it does exist. By the way, you have a .v2 at the end. That just means that it's based on a Windows Vista/7 configuration. So I would imagine V or V1 would be XP or something, because profiles are actually different based on there because the configurations are completely different. So that would be the profile for Windows Vista or Windows 7. So any changes that you make now here on the client side, like if I change my background, or whatever, it's being written to the whatever that's called, profile on the server. And anytime you log in, it's going to be pulling it from there, including documents. Again, be very careful with documents. It's going to, pull that as well. Let's see here. If I'm logged in, let me go back to my Windows. Let's finish up this lab activity, 5-6. If I go to Start. Go to Start on Windows 7 and right-click on Computer, and then go to Properties. Here's Advanced System Settings on the left-hand side. Advanced System Settings. Now, this is a high level of control, so the user can't get it to themselves. You actually need to log in as administrator from the server. This is on Windows 7. On Windows 7. Okay, I'll back up here again. On Windows 7, Start, right-click on Computer, Properties, Advanced System Settings on the left-hand side, log in as administrator, password with a capital P, password 01, capital P, and now we have the user profile information. This is related to this specific machine, not to the whole domain, this specific machine. So if I click on Settings, on this local machine, I have 3 local profiles. So administrator logged in locally. The user Paul logged in because that's who I originally logged in as a Windows user. So I have a local profile there. And you can see it's 25 meg even though I didn't do anything. And then I have this user, the salesperson one. There's a copy of the profile locally, but it's a roaming profile. And how this works then is really nice, is that if perchance I wasn't near the network and I couldn't log in, I still have my copy of my profile that I can use to, if I don't have access to the server. If I do have access to the server, to do a comparison and say, wait a second, oh, my current matches my server one, so I'm not going to copy it over. This was the last place I used it. If I happen to be on a different computer, they say, hey, my local copy of my roaming profile doesn't match the server just copies the whole thing over again. And it copies everything over, all your settings, all your documents, everything. No. Nope. Active Directory does that because if I look under the user account, when I log in, I'm logging in as this user. And then when I log in into Active Directory, into the domain, when I log into the domain, it says, you know what, how do I know what your settings are? Well, let's take a look at that. Let's take a look at profiles. So I click on profiles. Oh, let me go get your profile from this location. It's out on the server. Doesn't match my local one. I don't even have a local one. So I copy it all down. So yes, once you log in, it's going to have a copy of that on the local machine. But, it may need to. Correct. Correct. Roaming profiles are fantastic. The one downside of it, and they talk about it in the chapter, is dealing with, it does do your local documents. So like my documents, my pictures, and that kind of stuff. If that gets large, it's copying that every time, especially, not every time, only the things that have changed, if it's changed, I should say. So if you use the same computer over and over and over, it's not a big deal. If I use this computer, and then that computer, and then that computer, it's constantly, saying, hey, that doesn't match. Let me pull this whole thing down. So if you have a terabyte of personal files, it's going to download a terabyte. That takes a while. There are some ways around it, and the book talks about it. So, if you read through it, we don't work with that quite yet. I think we do later on in the book. But redirecting those local drives, like documents and pictures and music and whatever, to a server so it doesn't get pulled down all the time. So even though I click on, Start, and I go to Computer, and I click on Documents, this really isn't local. It's actually redirected, and the user never knows the difference, and that's more secure and everything. So, but we're not doing that right now. So don't. I probably lost you in that process. Sorry. Okay, we're going to configure the roaming profile for multiple users, and then customizing a. Yeah, just cancel all of that. So what we've done so far is look at salesperson 1. And when we worked with salesperson 1, let me double click on the person, and I go to profile, I told exactly where to go. Server 10 profile salesperson 1. That is the location that I want that to go. Now I could name it something else, but why would you? That'd be really confusing. Keep them all the same. Make it the username. Well, let's do this with multiple people. Say I have 100 people in sales, and I want them all to have roaming profiles. Like I said, you have to do it for every person. You create the share, and then every account needs to be told where that roaming profile is going to be. Well, there's kind of a shortcut to do this. I can edit multiple users. So I select both users 2 and 3, salespersons 2 and 3. And I right-click on here, and I go to properties. Now, again, we've worked with properties of multiple users before, correct? So, and we don't have the full list of things, but we have multiple things that we can change that they are in common. One of them is the profile. If I click on the profile, now if I click on the profile path here, this little checkbox, it's going to overwrite everything that's in there. Now, for those 2 people, I don't have a profile information. So let's start typing something in. // server 10, and then the share is profiles. So I'm going to create it out on this profiles share on server 10. So which one do I do? Do I do person 2 or do I do person 3? I don't want to do that because they're both going to be person 2 then, and that make it really difficult to be actually sharing a profile. You don't want that to happen. That's where variables come in very, very valuable to us. Anything that starts and ends with percent signs is a variable. And so if we type in username at this point, the system says, hey, that's a variable. So type in // server 10 / profiles /% username %. And I'm going to click OK on here. And now the magic of variables comes in. Just click off of those 2 people so they're not selected. And now click on salesperson 2, right-click properties, and then click on the profile tab. It replaced the username % with the actual username. So it put in salesperson 2. And for salesperson 3, properties, it does the same thing. For profile, salesperson 3. Now, they don't have you go through these activities, but if you logged in as salesperson 2 right now, then in your profiles directory, salesperson 2 profile would show up. And if you logged in as salesperson 3 profile would show up as well. Okay. The next section talks about working with sort of modifying that or putting it to the next section deals with customizing a default roaming profile. And you can do steps 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 to sort of get ready for all that. Step 11 doesn't work. The copy to button isn't functional. And that's what I'm trying to work with the publisher right now. If you can't copy a profile to another profile, you can't change the default profile. So that does not allow us to do that lab. And if you can't change if you can't copy to another profile, you also can't do mandatory profiles, which is activity 5-8. So just for today, we're doing activity 5-7, steps 1, 2, and 3. We're going to skip the rest of 7 for now, and we're going to skip all of 8 for now. Just finishing up with the idea of profiles, go back and read pages 174 and 175. It talks about mandatory profiles, but I'm sorry, back in 175 specifically, management profiles. The cost of roaming profiles on the bottom of page 175, it talks about that whole copying, and it could be extensive at some point. The next section is dealing with group accounts. This gets really confusing very quickly. We're going to go through it, sort of follow the steps, follow along if you can. If not, it is nothing super, super critical. We have 2 different group types, which we've already looked at. We have a distribution group and a security group. Distribution groups cannot be used for security. Only security groups can. And you can convert one group to the other. It allows you to switch them back and forth. I don't know why, but you can. The other part is the group scope. The group scope is sort of the breadth of how far this domain is going to be working, and this group is going to be working. The default is global, and that's me working sort of more or less within the domain area. We have the domain local, though. It's the main security principle recommended for assigning rights and permissions to domain resources. Although both global and universal groups can also be used for this purpose, Microsoft's best practices recommend using these groups to aggregate users with similar access or rights. Global and universal groups should then be added as members of the domain local groups, which are added then to the DACL, which is the access control list. The process can be summarized by the acronyms AGDLP. Is that an acronym? AGGUDLP. AGDLP. That's really easy to remember. And even the phrases beyond that are like really strange. Accounts are made up of members of global groups, which are made up of domain local groups, which are assigned permissions to resources. How that acronym helps me remember that, I'm not sure, but that's the training. Global groups, as mentioned, global group is used mainly to group users of the same domain with similar access or rights. And then ultimately on page 179 is universal. It's special in a couple of ways. First, a universal group's membership information stored only in the global catalog server. And in fact, they're the only group that's truly universal. It is across everything, everywhere. So the last activity we'll be working on is activity 5-9. Really confused the heck out of you and me. I'm just showing you what things can be nested into what, who you can group under where. And if you want to follow along, great. Otherwise, you can just watch this process and then sort of just do it step by step later on, because I'm going to go through it kind of quickly and try not to confuse myself or confuse you. Okay, the first thing we're working with is we are going to be using users and computers on our server. And we're going back to the test OU, which we created a long time ago. And we'll be creating 6 different groups, 2 global, 2 domain local, and then 2 universal. So I'm going to right-click and do a new group. And it's going to be group 1-G for global. And I keep it as global on the left-hand side. And I click OK. Right-click again, new group, and I'm going to create a group 2-G for global. And I'm going to create 2 domain local ones, so new group called group 1-DL. And this time I make sure that I choose the group scope of domain local. And I click OK. Now I'm going to create a second group 2. A domain local group called group 2 domain local, and again make sure I choose a domain local. And I create 2 universal groups, so new group 1-U, make sure I choose universal for the group scope, and a group 2-U for universal as well. So I have 2 groups, global groups, 2 domain local groups, and 2 universal groups. And again, if you want to follow along, that's great, and try to keep up and do it. Otherwise, you know, if you do follow the steps, they do work in this activity. You have to be very, very careful what you're doing. It's easy to get messed up. I did it myself. In the right-hand pane, we're going to click on the group 1 group. The group 1 global, I should say, group 1 global, and open its properties. And under general, we can see that it's global. Notice that the domain local option is disabled because I cannot convert from a global to a domain local. So I can't convert from a global to a domain local. So the next thing I want to look at is under the members tab. So if you're a global group, you can't change to domain local group, but you can change to universal. Correct. Gets really strange. Okay, step number 4 on page 182, click on the Members tab, and we're going to add Group 2 Global to Group 1 Global. Okay, so let's look under Group 2. I just type in Group 2 and I check names. And the only one that comes up is the global. I can't add the Group 2 domain local or universal to this one. I can only add the global one to this one. And that's the only thing that came up. And then I click OK. So I can do that. Now I want to add Group 1 domain local to this group. So I want to add a domain local group to here. So I'm just going to type in, just group, and I check names, and all I see is Group 1 global and Group 2 global, and I have no Group 1 domain local. You can't do it. These lists only show things that you're capable of doing, and group domain local is not one of them. So I'm going to click cancel on there, and I'm going to click cancel on there. So that's the only thing I can add onto there. On step 7 now. So I've added Group 2 to Group 1 global. Now if I go to Group 2 global, Group 2 global, I open it up, and these are the properties. It's a global, so I can go to universal, but I can't go to domain local, which we already knew. But now I want to change it to universal. And I click apply, and it says you can't. Well, I thought I could. Well, you can if that's all you were, but you can't because you can't have a global group as a member of a universal group. And right now your global group has a global group member. Did you get that? Good. Who's on first? What's on second? Did you? I don't know. Okay. So it's not going to let you do that. And then click OK. So let's kind of cancel off here. Now let's go to the domain local Group 1. Group 1 DL. In the group scope section, the global option is disabled because you can't go from there to there either, but in fact you could go to universal. If I go to its members tab, I want to add Group 1 global to this domain local group. So I click add, I'm going to type in group, and I check for names, and what things can I add? Group 1 Group 1 global. OK, and I click OK, and I'm able to do that. So for a domain local group, I can add a global group. Click back up on, now we're going to go to universal now. So Group 1 universal, Group 1 universal. I'm opening up Group 1 universal, and I'm going to add Group 2 universal as a member. So members of Group 1 universal, I'm going to add. I'll just type in group again. And what can I add? I'm going to add Group 2 universal. I click OK. So that's good. Now let's go to Group 2 universal, who I just made a member of Group 1 universal. And I'm going to switch this from, obviously, universal can go to global or local domain. And I think I want to switch it to a domain local. And I click OK, and it says you can't, because then you would be a domain local and having a universal member, and you can't do that. Why you do this, I don't know. And I click OK, and let's see here. It does. Not member. There's members and members of. Members of. It'll definitely be there. Under Group 1 Universal, let's see. Sorry. I click OK. Group 1 Universal. It wants me to try to add Group 1 Domain Local. And I can't. It's not on the list. But I can add group 1 global to this, so I can create a global, I can have a global group part of a universal group. And that is that. Confusing as heck. Obviously, different purposes for different types of groups. We'll apply them as we need them, and we'll sort of go from there. We're not finishing up Chapter 5. That's as far as we're getting or got this morning as well. The rest of Chapter 5, we're going to do some more group things, working with default groups, and then we get into managing computer access, which is another subject in itself, and then automating the account management through batch files, through using dsquery and dsmod, and using the ldiff.de file to create users. And that's what's left in the chapter yet. So it's quite a bit in Chapter 5. I still like to read Chapter 6. I am behind on updating learning activities. I completely apologize for that. It's been completely overwhelming without so many classes. I'm hoping to get this straightened out this weekend. I have a lot of videos I need to put up there. There's some lab sims I need to put out there. Once I get everything up, I will be emailing you and saying, oh yeah, be careful and watch out for these things and make sure that you eventually get these things done. So you might end up having to look back at a couple of lab, learning plans. I will definitely note those though and tell you what you need to do. I am not here to trick you or try to say, oh, you missed that. That's your problem. I will try to communicate as best as I can. And from here on out, try to do even better for keeping things up to date. Questions or comments on anything? Right now, the midterm and the final are planned on being based on the lab sims. That means I have to get them out to you for you to do them. So I definitely need to be working on that very quickly. The midterm is scheduled for 2 weeks from today. That'll be week 8, which means I have to get lab sims out there, past lab sims, current lab sims, and even next week's lab sims out there so you can practice with them. The lab sim test will be its own, it'll be a standalone test, but the exact, I don't know, my screen keeps doing this today. All my screens are flickering. It's going to be word for word the lab sims that you've done. And it's going to be, it's going to say, do this. The difference is that's going to be 1 consecutive, and then you get graded as a whole, successful or unsuccessful. You can practice as many times as you want. You can take notes. You can use your book. You just can't use each other is the main thing. So when you go through the lab sims, take notes, and right-click here, type this, whatever. So it should be very straightforward. Work with those, so it should be able to work with that. That's the plan. The day of the final, I'm not going to be here. I'm going to a conference in Eau Claire, so that should make things even more interesting. So I'm probably going to let you do it as a take-home, do-it-at-home type thing. Not Wednesdays, only Thursday and Friday I'll be at the conference. So it'll be this class, then network design on Friday. So it kind of worked out well as far as what we're covering that day. We're not going to lose a week in the process. And that's the midterm. That's the midterm. So 2 weeks from today, I'll be gone. But that does mean that we really need to get through what we need to get through, kind of next week, which is hoping to be through chapter 6 yet. We may end up, I may end up giving you some lab sim stuff that we may not have covered in the classroom. But I think if you have enough time to practice with the lab sims, that shouldn't be a huge issue. Just because of time, we may skip a couple of activities and let you do just the lab sim with that. Excellent question. Other? Some are and more will be. Yes. 6 is nothing on 6. Did I put lab sim last time? I have a lab sim from last time? Yeah. Lab sim, yes, 1.1. Giving you a heads up for today, it's 1.2 and 1.3. And then for next time, it'll probably be like, well, I better look. I better double check what ones are faced with. So It's going to end up being like 5 or 6 to be done, begin with for the midterm, just because of the time that we're working with. And give me honest feedback. This really stunk. Or yeah, I like doing it this way. That I can do the lab sim as a test, and it's the first time doing it. So please give me feedback. Shannon, let me log in. For our server administration class, check the learning plan thing item over here. We are on schedule, and we're going to stay on schedule. But ideally, we're going to get through Chapter 6 of next week, one way or the other. So like for last week was February 14th. It's Learning Plan 5. You should see Learning Plan 5 out there. So last week was Learning Plan 5. These would have been the activities that you did. Oh, the video is out there. I forgot. I thought I forgot to link it. So the learning activity from last week would have been complete Lab Sim 1.1 organizational units. Lab 6, Learning Plan 6 is going to show up today, later today or tomorrow morning, and it's going to say complete Lab Sims 1.2 and 1.3, and also have the YouTube video out there as well.